April 20th CAB meeting, Climate Action Advisory Board for Concord. Hopefully you all got the agenda. It's a little tricky to get that out without Amanda's help, but I think we managed. Learned from, from Jake, and Amanda gave good guidance too. So, but I hopefully we got everything posted on time. And just a matter of business. Oh shoot, Brian was supposed to take notes today. He was our note taker. I don't know, Michael.
Coincidence.
Yeah, I know that happened last time too, Jake. But Jake, it did end up coming.
I was only late.
Yeah, that's right.
Followed through, and I wasn't very timely in getting you the notes back. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm glad you remembered because I had forgotten. So, with someone else who's doing it later, we can switch it around. Would someone else be willing to take notes tonight? Anybody?
Go on.
If not, Courtney, I can take some notes tonight.
Okay.
I can take my turn.
I can try. I find it really hard to take notes and talk or to lead. I often miss about half a dozen things, but we can also check the recording too. So, okay. Well, maybe Amanda and I'll tag team it. We'll see if we can come up with enough notes before the next meeting. All right. With that, I'm going to share my screen just so we can have the agenda up. Go. All right. So let's jump into approval of the minutes from March 16th meeting that Jake did provide, and hopefully everyone got a chance to at least peruse them. I thought they were very good, captured most what we talked about, which was a good reminder. Is there any comment or question on the notes as posted?
Courtney, I have a question on it. These minutes were terrific, by the way. There's a section in here about the planning board, and there was some discussion about they could possibly include emission-based standards, which I thought was really interesting. And I tried to go back to my notes to figure out what were we thinking there. Does anyone recall how? I mean, that it wouldn't prohibit gas heating, but it could drive more electrification.
I think
it's a cool idea, but I just don't recall the context.
Yeah, I think John has brought that up that time and could probably elaborate for you. I didn't put specific names against all of these, but John,
great idea, right? I mean, setting standards from the planning board if we can't do it other ways.
Well, I think the issue that came up was setting some kind of energy performance standard and conflicting with the state energy code. And so I think I said some places like Cambridge and Boston are using emissions-based standards because that's not technically regulated by the state.
I got it. So where we were having difficulty with the home rule petition because of the running into not having authority for municipalities to set building codes, that this was kind of like a workaround. I thought it was pretty cool, but yeah, so that's the context. Thank you. I get it.
That is related to something that I wanted to make an announcement about tonight, is that last night I wasn't able to make it because I had to go to another meeting, but I know that the planning board did receive some draft site plan review regulations. They're in draft, staff haven't reviewed them. And it was the first time the planning board was seeing them as well. And so it is in the early stages. they used, I think, Lexington as a base, which does incorporate sustainability into the site plan review. And so I don't have a timeline on this right now. The site plan review only requires a public hearing. I think they will probably try to move quickly to at least get some site plan review regulations established, because right now we don't have any. And so having some is an improvement on none. But if anyone has a particular interest in that, and Courtney, as the that being your champion area, maybe we can touch base on that too. But if this is a good period or a good regulation to look at how those standards could be incorporated, maybe this is an opportunity to start the conversation. And since it is just a public hearing, even if they just get the site plan review established, say in May or June, we can always work with them to add this in later, because again, the timeline isn't restricted by the town meeting cycle. So just wanted to bring that up as an announcement. And if we have some time to talk about it later in the meeting, when we go through our priorities, happy to dig into it further then.
Okay.
Great.
Who submitted the regulations?
So we did receive technical assistance through MAPC. They had some extra funds left over, and so
Okay.
they sort of pulled several different examples, and I think the planning board members themselves had pulled some different examples. And then just based on discussions and goals and what seemed like a good fit for Concord, Lexington was recommended. And that's, you'll see if you go look at it, the draft for the planning board last night, I don't think got fully even formatted over to like a Concord version, if you will. So it is still in the beginning stages.
Yeah.
But that's kind of been the process so far. I know that the planning board had some priorities that they wanted, and so certain sections from other communities have been put in there or are planned to be put in. But yeah, we did receive some help, but then also Elizabeth Hughes from the planning department has done quite a bit of work on it.
Okay. Good update. All right. Well, any other comments or questions before we approve minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Great. Thanks, Warren. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Terrific. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right. The meetings from March 16th are approved. And we can move on to the chair update. So the first thing I wanted to talk about here, and I don't know, because we didn't circle back to the process document last time, we may just be able to do this in a different way. But I realized after we had our last conversation that I won't be in town the weekend of town meeting. And we had discussed, CAB voicing support. And I know you can do that a couple of different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person. I think it can be impactful if it is in person at the meeting. I just won't be here to do so. So, I guess at this point, I'd be looking for someone that can step into that role. And I thought it doesn't hurt to come back to the conversation of having a vice chair. For instance, tonight I'm actually in DC because we're on family vacation, but because I don't have anyone to take on the mantle, I'm running the meeting on vacation. So obviously that's not ideal, but it is what it is. So it'd be great if we could, come to agreement on someone that could be willing to stand in, even if it's an interim for the time being until we find, permanent vice chair. But especially for that, for the presence at town meeting, someone would be willing to, maybe you're already going to be present and we can designate you as the spokesperson if you're so willing. So that is my first ask for this evening. My other updates are pretty minor in relation. Would anybody be attending and willing to be the voice of CAB at town meeting in May? Is anyone going? Is anyone attending in person? It's okay if not. Sounds like maybe not.
I'd have to confirm, but I might be able to support that, Courtney. I
Okay.
can't commit right now.
I know it is a
Sorry.
Saturday, correct? If I'm not mistaken. No,
Yeah,
It's on Sunday.
Sunday. Okay.
for Sunday.
I still won't be back
It's-
until Monday, unfortunately.
It's Sunday, May 1st, right?
I thought, I just couldn't remember the exact day. I thought it was May 1st.
And
Yeah,
and talking with other town staff, if there's like rollover, which I think there tends to be every year, it'll roll
Mhm.
on to Monday night.
Yes, I think they are planning for that. John, you were going to?
Yeah, no, I'm
Yep.
realizing I volunteered to do a Museum of Science climate change event on May 1st.
May 1st, okay.
Yeah, but if it rolls over to Monday, I'll be
Monday.
around, so I could kind of like Jake can do Sunday and
Okay,
I could do Monday, I could do that.
okay. Unfortunately, we won't know, where the placement of particularly Article 38, which is the one we had, I think, agreed upon supporting. So I guess maybe Amanda, you and I can see if there's another avenue to show support. I don't know if it can be done just through a letter read by the moderator, or I don't know if that can even be you. I'm not sure. I don't know the logistics there.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. My instinct was maybe Nat as the select board liaison, but I don't know for sure.
Okay,
But I can ask how that might be possible. Because it could even be maybe a designee, like just another resident that CAB has designated.
okay.
I think because town staff don't take positions on articles, it might be
It
awkward
can't
for me
be you.
to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
But maybe I'll ask how that's been dealt with in the past.
Okay.
It's probably better that a board member do. I have flights right now to fly to Boulder, but there's some possibility we may not go. And if we
Okay,
don't go,
okay.
I will certainly step in. If
Okay.
John or Jake or whomever, but maybe
Okay.
one of us.
So we have some maybe.
Somehow we'll get one of us there.
Okay.
Yeah, I could maybe do it as well on Sunday. I could not do it Monday night, but
Okay.
I was not sure whether I was going to be able to attend, but it's a possibility.
Maybe. Okay. So lots of maybes. Unless my plans change, which it's not looking like they will, I will be gone Friday to Monday. So I definitely would not be available. Unless they Zoom you in. That's an interesting thought.
I don't know, some moderator could handle that one.
I don't know. I did
Armin?
I did attend the special school meeting, and they were doing some different things related to Zoom and social distancing at that meeting. So, but, okay, all right. Well, if sounds like we've got a lot of maybes. If all of those maybes could, take a look at things and just keep us posted as we get closer. I can draft up our support. Essentially, I think we all agreed it could be pretty simple. for
Yeah.
Article 38, and then we'll talk about further support later on. Okay. Let's see. So joint meeting update, that is still in the works related to the CMLP meeting. And now that Amanda's back from vacation, we may be able to get that actually scheduled. I think we're talking about for June. The other opportunity, or it's not really a joint meeting, I wouldn't say at this point, but if CAB has any availability, any CAB members, there's a meeting coming up that I believe tentative on the 28th of April that CSEC is calling to discuss issues related to kind of facilities that we'll talk about again later in the meeting. It's a one-off for us since we don't, this is our monthly meeting, but there's an opportunity to kind of learn more about that school boiler issue. We'll talk about it more, and I see Brad is on the call. He may be able to offer some detail when we get to that. But those are two kind of upcoming meetings I wanted to put on everyone's radar. The third bullet there, youth membership. This is something that I would like us to continue to explore. I don't think we've gotten any updates in terms of new green cards coming in. I do know, as Amanda mentioned, they're revamping that system. But we still haven't really landed on any potential new members. And I just thought it might be worth us, talking about the youth membership and or potential interest again. I note that Patriots Day, the parade on Monday, there was a group of high school students who marched. I don't know if anyone else attended and caught that. But
sunrise, right?
Right,
sunrise,
right. Yeah. And my daughter actually was attending the green team for a while. So, and she mentioned that there's, at least 2 or 3, maybe more, climate and or sustainability focused groups at the high school in particular. So it's just something I was thinking about as a way to both, encourage new voices, but also to this group, but also to just encourage civic involvement. Because, it's something that I think, especially our youth is particularly interested in. How could we kind of bridge that, even if they're not a voting member, or I don't know what that might look like. So I'd like to I think we have enough on the agenda tonight to cover, but I'd like to put that on the agenda for future. I'd like to figure out how we as CAB feel about that, and what benefit we might see, and whether it's something we wanted to pursue more.
Courtney, I think that's a really great idea. And I remember when Peter was with us, some of our early, when we actually met in person at the town hall, he brought a couple students with him.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
I thought that was splendid. So,
Okay.
maybe we can build off of that and find someone who's really active and would
Okay.
like to, share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's add it to our.
Can I also jump in on that?
Absolutely,
I think that's a good idea. Can we just ask the high school if they want to recommend somebody for the committee and propose that person to the town?
Maybe so, or maybe they have an idea of how to go about, how to go about gauging interest, right? And because I think we'd want it to be someone that has some interest, and they may not even be aware of, what these committees these town committees do and that they exist. That's a good idea.
I can talk to Priscilla Guiney about it, who's the green team's like lead.
Okay.
I'm working with her on some other things.
Okay.
I think when we talked about this before, one of the cautionary things was that if we have someone join as a senior, they may be with us for a year or less.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's a problem really, but just something to be aware of maybe.
Yeah.
Because if we continually got students, it would just maybe be that particular position has more turnover than the others. And so I don't think it's a major challenge, but wanted to just raise that was kind of the concern that had come up when we've talked about it previously.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I do think we shouldn't let that hinder us. Again, I think that in my mind, the point is one, to hear, younger voices, but also to get them interested in what this might look like,
And I think Delphine is the organizer of the Sunrise Movement, or maybe the co-organizer. And that could be another joint meeting maybe we could have. Maybe they would want to come and sort of present what they are working on.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even if it's hard to find someone that would actually, be able to commit to joining the committee, if we could have a periodic check-in with those youth groups and get their input, that could be another valuable process to consider. So something to think about.
That's a good idea. Yeah, Jake, if we can't get a commitment, at least get some exposure between the two groups, or multiple groups maybe. Great. And before we move on from membership, I did get an email over this past month from the planning board, and I believe they're losing 2 members that are sustainability focused, or that have had a sustainability interest. And so there was also a call to us as CAB to, is there anyone that we know of that might, be able to fill those roles? And I hadn't responded yet because I didn't want to respond and say, well, we're having a hard enough time filling our roles. But, I think it just speaks to the need for, involvement on these types of town committees, and how can we encourage that? So that's really, what got me thinking about the youth piece, even though I don't know that that's all we, should be doing, but it's just how do we garner interest in town process, right? So I think more to come on that. Let's what we'll do is make that an item for topic for either the next meeting, or one of the 2 next meetings, let's say, and maybe Amanda, you and I can have a couple of reach outs to these folks. If you want to connect me, I'm happy to take up that mantle. To see what conversations we can start before then. And then the last thing, just a reminder that the CSEC Cooler Concord series is coming up. Believe it's starting next week, if I'm not mistaken. Is it the 28th, or is it all week? I don't remember the dates exactly. And Brad, if you
the keynotes is on the 27th. That's a hybrid meeting, so you can tune in on Zoom or in person at Harvey Wheeler.
Okay.
Then the Arbor Day event is like coffee celebration, sort of low key Friday morning, and then Saturday is a larger festival. The Green Team, Sunrise Movement, lots of other organizations are
We'll be
involved in
there.
that.
Good.
Mothers Out Front has done a ton. So it's going to be fun, big event. Sounds like a lot of people are traveling this upcoming that weekend. So maybe won't see you there, but if you are
Yeah.
in town, would love to have you.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems to be a big travel weekend, at least for cab. All right. Okay, well, with that, I believe that was all. I was not able to attend the chair's breakfast this morning, so I was traveling also. So I'll try to catch up. I did put an initial reach out to the Transportation Committee. I did not hear back, so I'm going to try to ping them again. Sometimes I make progress on the first reach out and then I forget to follow up. So I'm hopeful that we can still make that connection. Probably not for the next meeting, but maybe for June would be great. I really want to hear more about the transportation roadmap that they're developing. And I think we talked about being interested in that. So I'll keep working on that. And with that, I think that's all for my update. Amanda, I don't know. I left some time in just in case. I knew you'd be present, but I wasn't sure if you'd have any other updates you wanted to share.
Yeah, I did want to put out there that we have sort of a yearly contract for the sustainable dashboard. And just to remind folks what that looks like, I can share my screen so people can have kind of an indication of what I'm talking about, just in case you haven't seen it before. Too many windows open here. Here we go. So this is the dashboard. It has these different tiles that are on the different elements for the Sustainable Concord plan. If you go into into one of the pages, it has different topic areas, but it does have some of the metrics. It's somewhat interactive in that you can, change these graphs, and it's sort of set up in a way that it has data and it will tell about different initiatives that we have in town. And then typically at the bottom, there's a section on how people can get involved with links to different resources. So it is a really nice format. And then on the action plan page, it's sort of a place where the Sustainable Concord plan lives in more of an online digital version, and that these drop down so you can see the goals and then the actions, and then you can click on all the blueprints here. And so it does make it a little bit more interactive than just downloading the PDF. So it's a nice website. And then each month we do receive 4 social media posts on different topic areas. And then if there are any updates, so for example, the EV working group this winter did some blogs on driving EVs in winter. And so then we added those blogs to the website. And so it has some great features. Some of those features, I think, or some of the information is already on our website. And I know CSEC is also using the Cooler Concord website. So folks haven't seen that before. This is what it looks like, and it serves slightly different purpose in that you can track your individual actions, and then it has like an events page. Again, some of that information is on the town website, but this is a more sort of user-friendly way of showcasing it. The Sustainable Concord dashboard page with the social media does currently cost about $4,500. It could cost a little bit more, just as the price of everything goes up year to year. And I don't have that price with me right now. I've requested it, but I haven't received it. As far as like the analytics for the page, for the last 3 months, we've pretty consistently seen new users to the site each month, around say 100 people each month going to the site. And so it does show that people are going there and it's getting used. And for me, it's sort of two things that I'm considering is the cost with the amount of traffic that we're getting, is that cost benefit ratio there? And then the other is that we do have these 3 different websites, and I don't want it to become confusing to people of like, where do I go to find the information that I'm looking for? And then I guess the last point would be, it does take quite a bit of effort to keep 3 websites updated. And so I just wanted to put it out to CAB, and I'll also talk to CSEC about it tomorrow on if anyone had strong feelings one way or the other of like, I love this website, we should really keep it, or I really don't think that's working for us. I've heard in the community that no one uses it, or no, like, is there feedback? Could it be? Or if there's, feedback, like this is working, but it really would be better if we could do X, Y, or Z on it. That would sort of help me in the decision making. I know that we do have a lot on the agenda, and so maybe we can talk about it briefly, but then if there's follow-up that folks have, happy to receive that via email and continue the conversation offline.
Man, did you have, from your experience, do you have some recommendations? When I hear you say 3 websites and keeping them all current, and sounds like a lot of money, almost $5,000 to keep that current. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, so, and it does include the social media posts and 1 graphic per month, which is helpful, but ultimately I have to go post them anyway. And so it's really just the writing of them. So I think it's helpful, but also when I look at the analytics of our social media, it doesn't really, each post doesn't get a ton of views or a ton of likes. And so it also, to me, maybe the posts aren't engaging enough, or maybe it's just not an effective platform for our community. And so I think there is some, engagement I could do there to figure out really what's happening. But I thought this group might have heard from, others that you talk to on what's working and what's not.
This site's maintained by KLA, is that right?
Yeah, and so I can send them, like if we get new metrics or we wanted to update on a particular chart or graph, I can send it to them and say, hey, we have new data for this, or I'd like to change the wording to that. And so they will update it on the back end, but a lot of the content generation would be driven sort of by me or by other volunteers that were looking at it to say, hey, I do have a new update for this, or I want to add this component on.
So it sounds like the most valuable thing is KLA taking content from you and updating the dashboard, so if that's the case, then it seems like one way to look at it is, if you had to do that yourself, how much time is going to take, and is it worth $4,500? I'm guessing it probably is, but you would know better. I mean, I think there's probably a bigger question about what's the best way for the town to be communicating about these issues, where Cambridge is struggling with this too, and so we hired a big PR firm to put together a fancy communication strategy, which is getting close. But there's a lot to think about, I think, and I don't think it makes sense to have 3 separate websites. So that's one thing. So if anything that can be done to consolidate and reduce your time, and then perhaps there are strategies to drive more people to look at it, which of course requires work probably, but so I guess I would look at it, but I think it's sort of depends on whether you see it as useful and it's enabling something to happen that you wouldn't have a time to do otherwise, because we only have one of you. And anything that extends your capacity, I think is useful. I mean, the scheme of things these days, 4,500 is not that much money. So,
Hey, Jake.
Yeah.
Warren had his hand up first, so
You can
I'll let
go.
him go.
You can
Oh,
go.
I'm sorry. I missed that.
No,
Sorry,
that's
Warren.
okay. Go ahead, Warren.
Okay, I agree with what John said. That was very good. My two additional comments is just, yeah, 3 websites is too much. There needs to be some plan so there aren't 3 websites. And if you were to keep this, I wonder about renegotiating with KLA to eliminate the social media part of it and see whether that would reduce the cost of the contract, because the social media seems less useful than the dashboards and the maintenance of the nice graphics on this site.
Yeah, and I think we definitely on our website would not have I don't think we would have the capability to do the same like graphical things that are on the dashboard. And so it does provide a better interface for showing those types of things, rather than just a static PDF that people are clicking on and opening.
Yeah, I just add, I mean, I agree. If we could consolidate those websites, that sounds like a really good idea. I know there've been past conversations about, and I think feedback from different interns that we've had that said it was like confusing and hard to find information on where to go for information on incentives and rebates. So I think it's kind of almost need to think through, like, what are the most important things that we want residents to be taking away, or action that we want them to be taking, and how do we, both on the town websites and then any supporting websites, how do we amplify and drive ideally that traffic to kind of one place that has the right experience? But I mean, at the end of the day, you're always going to have, the other site, they're going to have like Mothers Out Front and other groups that are going to have their own sites and their own social media efforts. But, to the extent that we can have those complement and drive traffic to those resources, or, that guidance, I think is good. And I mean, I think the dashboards are great. There's something that I like to see, but I don't know to what extent, average resident finds value in it. So what is it? How do you make sure that that's most impactful, right? Yeah, there's a lot to kind of dig into probably, and you probably don't have the time, but I think there's some quick wins maybe that you can pursue, and we can continue to kind of iterate on it over time maybe.
And Michael, you had your hand up.
I'm wondering if maybe if it'd be all helpful to have KLA tell us what's the foot traffic on all 3 of these. Get some data back on the hits that we're having. Other people who are doing something similar like this, maybe spending that $5,000 less about reactive, but more proactive, so that if we have someone like KLA being able to send out every now and then where we stand, what the Climate Action Advisory Board is doing, just sort of to generate some enthusiasm, some action, the fact that everybody's engaged. I would find $5,000 spent in that direction might be better than just maintaining 3 websites. But perhaps the first step is how successful are these? Who's using them? Who's reading them? Is it influencing anybody? Do we have, what I oftentimes think is, we have too much information. It's not that we don't have enough, we have too much, and we're not able to process it all. It hasn't been boiled down and summarized in very quick sound bites that you can do things with, or at least be mindful of. you get a little overwhelmed with just so much stuff. Anyway, that's one thought.
Good comments. And before, just make sure any other CAB members wanted to chime in. Not Brad? Oh, wait, John.
Yeah, sorry. I mean,
That's
just,
okay.
so Michael's comment made me think, so I think that would be important to think about audiences. So like, so we have the websites and Amanda sends out a newsletter, but if only people interested in climate change sign up, then we're kind of like talking to ourselves, I think.
Right.
And so at some point when Amanda has time, thinking about what audiences do we need to reach and what are the best strategies we have to do that. And then it may be that the dashboard is not that useful in that respect, right? But I think that that's actually a pretty important question, because otherwise we're not moving beyond the converted.
Okay, Brad, chime in.
Hi, thanks for the chance to. So I'm obviously a proponent of one of the websites because I designed the Cooler Concord website as a product of the nonprofit that I work with. And it's not a perfect solution. It's a low cost solution, but it is designed for user engagement of not climate people, but people who want to figure out how to do stuff. So I'd love the opportunity to talk with any of you who want to about what the site is about. And I would love to encourage any of you to check out that site and look at the actions page and see whether you think it's kind of the thing that regular residents might interact with and find useful. Thanks for the chance to say that.
Great.
And I would add to what Brad said is the Cooler Concord website does track actions that people take. And so you do see the effectiveness of it a bit more, in that on KLA, we can see the traffic that's on the site, but we don't know if it's truly driving people to take the action, versus the Cooler Concord website is tracking that because they say, yes, I've done it, or I'm thinking about doing it, or no, I'm never going to do that. And so it does have that. And so they do, although there are three, they do serve different purposes. And unfortunately, there's not a silver bullet at this time. And maybe that's okay if we connect them all diligently enough and make it clear to get to where you need to go. But yeah, I appreciate everyone's thoughts on it. And if you have any strong feelings one way or the other, later in the next few days, feel free to email me.
So just so I'm clear, to maybe help the group, the Cooler Concord website, you don't have to, it sounds like, do a lot to maintain that. That's maintained by largely by folks within CSEC or involved with CSEC. Is that true?
It's
Or are you still involved?
new to the town. So Brad generously has done a ton of work on the site.
Okay.
And previously the town was not affiliated with the site. We just signed a memorandum of understanding because CSEC was going to use the site for the series. And some of our other neighbors, municipalities have signed on, and other municipalities, grassroots organizations are the main entity that have that style of site. And so I would imagine that in the future, since the town has signed a memorandum of understanding, and we have also paid a due to be a part of the Mass Energize, I would like to be more involved in it. But since it's new, the town hasn't made much of the content that's on there.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, I do think, just chiming in and maybe it's saying what others have already said, but I think each of them each of them serves a different purpose. A couple of, I'd say the two that are not the town's specific website are more dynamic or intended to be, which could add benefit. And so it does sound like maybe a process to sort of streamline and, pull the best things from each one, or just somehow streamline it so that, we have, a lot of the information that is on each of those, but in a fashion that isn't taking so much of, your time and resources to maintain. I think that would be the key. And maybe, if we do it right, maybe you could even make the argument that it makes sense to spend some resources on having someone outside of you do that, is that may not be your, best and highest use sort of thing, but we appreciate the information that's there. So let's add it as a point of discussion. I guess it depends on how much further we want to try to take it versus, bringing in someone who knows more about websites than, well, at least than I do. I won't speak for the whole group, but what's the right way to set those up.
Yeah, and this has been helpful. I didn't hear any strong, like, yes, we absolutely need it, or any strong, like, oh, let's get rid of it. And so I think it sounds like we all have sort of mixed feelings, and I'll talk to CSEC about it tomorrow. And I've talked to some town staff about it. And so I'll kind of take all of this information, mull it over. I'm also going to meet with KLA next week, and they're going to have a new, talk to me about new offerings and what the next year contract could look like. And so I'll sort of piece all of that together. So thank you all for your input.
Good deal. All right. Trying to, anything else, I guess, for your update? That was the main
that's
thing.
great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, just trying to navigate back to the agenda here. Let's see where we're at. All right. So thought we could just spend a little time doing a quick check-in, and again, the purpose of this is just to see where folks are at, and how what progress, if any, you've been able to make over the last month. And so if you want to share, great. If you weren't able to get to it, we all understand that too, but just wanted to offer some time in the agenda to do that regular check-in. So Jake, any updates on the home energy?
Yeah, couple updates. Amanda shared an awesome connection with me to, I think, another advocate, climate supporter in, I think, Brookline, who participated in a home energy labeling program cohort with Earth Advantage and Rocky Mountain Institute back in 2019, and basically helped get me access to all of the materials for that program. I think there were like 22 cities that participated, and there's a ton of awesome information, much of which, some of which I had come across in my initial research, but a lot of which was super helpful in getting a better perspective of what, how different municipalities are approaching home energy labeling. They have a lot of template resources. They have a calculator tool. They have a template, kind of even like regulatory frameworks. There's a whole training program. So I've been digging into that, and it's been super helpful. There's a lot, so I'm still in the process of going through that. But I think that's going to be super valuable for me to kind of help refine my thinking, and kind of to come back to this group with some thoughts and recommendations specific to Concord's situation. And so that has been great. And then the other thing that I think I mentioned the last time was that the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership is starting a cohort of some other towns, again, focused on home energy scores. And they have their own kind of system that they've set up, which apparently is not, there's like a Helix kind of data set and approach that's not currently kind of Massachusetts hasn't signed on to, so there's some limitations, but I think it could be good just to understand what other towns are doing. And I think this is like a broader New England group, so I'm not sure how many Massachusetts communities will be part of it. I think it's a pretty small group. So I'm planning on trying to participate in that, again, to learn and inform, the recommendations. And I think the first meeting is next week. And I think it's going to be like I believe a monthly kind of facilitated dialogue. So those are the kind of two main things, developments since the last time I provided an update. I think I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Great. No questions? Great.
Okay.
No, that sounds good. I'm still making movement there, making progress. That's terrific. Sounds like a good contact. The climate vulnerability assessment, I don't know if Paul, John, or Amanda want to give an update there.
Well, I think that's a two-part thing. So I think Amanda can update us on the flood modeling. I started to outline a memo, but I haven't gotten very far. But basically, I'm trying to write a memo that would come from CAP and I think go to the town manager and select board to basically summarize what we know and don't know about climate change impacts in Concord, and then recommend that the town develop its own climate projections, start planning based on future projections, and conduct a vulnerability assessment, to the degree it can, based on those projections. So that's what I'm trying to work toward. But the
Great.
more, I think, substantive thing we're doing is the flood modeling.
Yeah, I can give an update on that. I haven't had a chance to circle back with you, Paul and John, after getting back from vacation. But OR's executive director, Allison Fieldjuma, was doing some outreach to some communities, and then Alan Cathcart from CPW or Public Works was doing some outreach to different communities to gauge interest in the regional flood model. Generally, there was interest in it, but not enough willingness to sort of pitch in a few $1,000s, which is really needed in order to cover the match for such a large model. And with that, in the limited time that we have to develop the grant for MVP, we decided to do somewhat of a hybrid approach that we'll still be putting together a model for Concord. So doing the pilot study for sure, or putting the grant together. Hopefully we will get the grant, but also putting in some time to engage the different communities and try to bring them on board so that in following rounds, we could expand that model. So making sure that the model is sort of taking into account some of the regional aspects and thinking through how some of the decisions that might be made could maybe be informed from some of the regional goals. knowing that the model could be headed in that direction later on. But also we had some questions ourselves, right, that we didn't know how to answer. Could we have one model that looked at low flows and looked at flooding, or will it be two separate ones? And there are some of those logistical questions that if we were to figure out, we could maybe go to the region with a more solid understanding ourselves of exactly how we would do it. And so I think that is the plan, to go for more of a hybrid approach to MVP this year for that. And I also did receive, I think yesterday, a scope of work proposal from MAPC to do the hazard mitigation plan, which would include climate change. And in looking at a vulnerability assessment, so I think it semi-relates to what you're talking about, John, but I don't know that it would go to the same level of detail of getting downscaled projections for Concord specifically. And the timeline on that is sort of what's running that at the moment. And so we may end up need to be pursuing that in depth separately and finding some separate funding to do it. Just because we have to keep our HMP updated, particularly as a lot of federal funding is going to be funneled through FEMA this year, and we need to have that plan updated in order to be eligible. And so that process might need to be decoupled from a deeper dive into really looking at the projections, because we wouldn't probably be able to get it done in time that our old plan expires, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but would have been nice if we could have done it that way, but logistically I think it may not work out.
Just to get the funding from MAPC to, I mean, was that what you were thinking, was to try to couple that together to get that?
And I don't
funded
think
through that same
MAPC
grant?
would have the skill set, Courtney, to like do the downscale productions.
Right.
And so they'll just be using like the best available data from the state to do the vulnerability assessment. Which there is a lot more data now than there was 5 years ago when we did the plan 5 years ago. So it will be an improvement from what we have now.
Okay. Anything else on that?
I was going to say, in terms of downscaled climate change projections, UMass Boston's coming out with them on a county level basis in a couple of weeks, but they also could be downscaled by town by this person at UMass Amherst. So it's not a big reach to get, current projections of precipitation and temperature.
Okay.
And it's disappointing that the regional model is not going to go forward. When you talked about a hybrid, did you mean like a Concord only model for stormwater?
So we will do the Concord specific model, and then the hybrid would be, I don't think we have all the details worked out yet, but we would be having regional meetings to have some of these conversations with the different municipalities to get more buy-in, and potentially doing some of the initial steps of seeing maybe like what data do they have, and maybe even collecting some of that data, so that we are laying basically the groundwork to develop a model, but not actually developing it in the first for the full watershed. But we would be developing a model for Concord.
So we are going to submit something to the MVP program for Concord for stormwater.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it will also include the drought and low flows, so that we can look at both of the sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you that. That's good. So
Yeah, I
thank you.
think that makes sense to work on the other towns and build that support, because they'll have long-term benefits, I think. I'd be interested to understand better how the Concord modeling will work, will take into account what's happening in the watershed. But I mean, we can talk about that later.
I'll
Okay.
just offer that I had just read not too long ago the vulnerability study that I guess I'm not sure exactly who authored it, but it was the 13 communities that are considered magic, and I can't remember what MAGIC stands for, but it's largely Concord, and then kind of think about a ring around that as far east is Lexington and west is Acton, and then kind of a circle. And particularly I was looking at some of the infrastructure related vulnerability that they had done. And this was back 2017, something like that. But it was striking to me just how different the communities, even within that 13, and those don't necessarily encompass all of the Suwasco watershed, but just how different all their water systems were, water and wastewater. From one side to the other, you've got Lexington being more urban, suburban, I'll say, to I think it was Bolton, that's way out there, next to 495, and don't even have a centralized water system, right? So that there's just a lot of difference in what drives those different communities related to their water infrastructure. So I thought that was interesting. So this, this regional kind of coalition building, if you will, could maybe be a real benefit. Because I think, helping people to understand that there are those different drivers, but that there are commonalities as well, will be the key. And where can we help each other, especially, those smaller communities within the watershed. All right. Let's, just in the interest of time, move on to financing. Warren, if you have an update.
Yes, as a reminder for folks, what we're trying to do here is to make financing available so that residential upgrades can be done in Concord without people having to worry about the large upfront costs of making those upgrades. And we're not going to have one solution for this problem, in part for a good reason, and that is that a partial solution has been put in place that deals with one segment of the market. And we talked about this last time, that through for gas customers through Mass Save, people who are going to be converting their homes from gas to air source heat pumps can now qualify for zero interest loans of up to $25,000. I have to confess that I am taking advantage of that program myself, and it's very easy to access. I could also tell you that from talking to contractors, this new program has really boosted the demand for heat pumps conversions from gas systems across Massachusetts, and that now one of the problems for contractors is getting equipment because there's such a demand from suppliers. But in any case, that only deals with one segment of the market, and it doesn't deal with, in some ways, the most important segments, which are residences that are using systems like oil, which have higher emissions than natural gas. And we've been exploring a bunch of different possibilities. I put together a memo that Amanda was on vacation, so she undoubtedly hasn't had time to review it, that I sent to Amanda and to Michael, discussing the possibilities and what we've learned so far. And after Amanda's review and edits, the goal will be to share that with the municipal light plant and have a meeting with them to inform them about some of these possibilities. There are also some of the things where we're continuing to have discussion about some of the different options. Michael recently participated and heard a presentation about a program that's being offered by Block Power, which is a third-party ownership program. It's most applicable to multifamily housing and to commercial installations. It could have some applicability to Concord. And I've been in touch with a company, Slipstream, which is interested in offering financing in Massachusetts through an on-bill repayment program. We've set up a meeting with them for next Monday. Both Michael and I will be participating in that. That's where things stand.
Great. Great. Any questions for Warren and or Michael on that?
I can just add one thing. Warren's done an amazing job sort of looking at the landscape and who is out there providing financing. My own curiosity came about from MCAN's having the Block Power feature, but who was on that, which was interesting to me, was Mark Pacheco from the legislature. And he had mentioned on that webinar that he was, or his team was going to be reaching out to Block Power to gain more understanding of the features. That for those of you might already be following this, but Block Power is, as Warren mentioned, is working in New York, and they are behind the Ithaca program design that has as its intent to essentially decarbonize all of Ithaca's residential homes and buildings in a very, very short time frame. And part of the strength that I was impressed with is not only the turnkey features and the measurement and evaluation, because one of the things we hear back from citizens that are installing, transforming their gas systems to heat pumps is getting more understanding of what does it mean in terms of its measurement. How much are they going to save? What is it going to cost? How can they afford it? It's just sort of the basic questions you would imagine trying to get a sense around whether you want to make a $30,000 investment. So they turnkey that part of it. And the conundrum that's been, and it runs through all of the other providers, even for that matter, the Heat Loan and Mass Save, which does not have an unlimited amount of capital, is the whole affordability index of where is this capital going to come from. And what Block Power has done somehow is engage the capital markets, where they've got hedge funds and pension funds that are giving the town of Ithaca over $100 million to actually execute on transforming 8,000 homes and decarbonizing them. So now they haven't done that, right? And it's not clear how many, they're just getting started. So we'll see whether that is the kind of catalyst necessary to move it forward. But as Warren said, Slipstream is another company that's also looking at addressing that affordability piece. So, and we have in our own wheelhouse with Abode, right? I had a chance to take part with Abode, to have them come, because we're decarbonizing our own house and have 3 proposals in. And I've been using it as a little bit as a test kitchen to say, what are the number one hesitancies of other than the already early adopters to scale this? And it has come back over and over of simplicity and access to having someone do this for them that they're confident in. And then also, as Warren pointed out, addressing the affordability. And what Block Power has done is set up a loan program going out 84 months. So you can imagine 84 months and making a payment every month, depending on how and what pathway you take, you're going to be able to get a positive cash flow on that investment versus paying, either the gas bill, the oil bill, or whatever. So that has tremendous promise. So I think I get a sense that we're kind of on the cusp of figuring out what is it that is keeping us from doing not 1, 2, or 3 homes, but 2,000 or 3,000. And the fact that Senator Pacheco was also asking the same question and is going to Block Power is pretty refreshing from the Commonwealth standpoint, because the governor set a goal of 1 million homes to be decarbonized, I think by 2030 and maybe earlier. So I guess there's more to be learned, and how that is relative to anything that we are doing is yet to be seen. Kind of exciting though, huh?
Definitely. No, thanks for that update. So a couple quick comments from John. And John, you first.
I think Jake had his hand up first.
I'm sorry, Jake.
No problem. I
You guys are
just
so polite to one another.
I just wanted to, I think we've shared this before, but maybe just confirm from Amanda that this is in fact happening. But I believe the light plant has committed to matching the Mass Save incentive. So if you are an oil or propane customer looking to replace or upgrade to or go electric, you can enjoy the same incentives. Is that still accurate, or is that still in the works?
The rebate part, but not the
Rebate.
loan part.
Not the loan. Okay.
Yeah. And so the rebates, I'd have to double check that the final numbers parsed out that they're the exact same. But if they aren't, they still are more substantial than they were last year, like quite a bit more substantial. And they did increase from their original proposal at the end of last year before we knew the change was coming. So that information is all up on the website now. If you are a fuel oil customer and are looking to switch.
Thanks. That's helpful. I wasn't sure what the final word was. Thanks.
Sure. All right, now, John.
Yeah, so I'm a big Block Power fan. I think they've cracked the code on the multifamily building sector, at least. Cambridge is engaging with them. I think would be issues for Concord to think about when we have, and Cambridge still has issues to work through. But I mean, the two ways and by the way, I have a contact at Block Power if Warren or Michael needs that. So their conventional entry point is they have a proprietary energy model they use. So they model the entire community to identify opportunities. And that's where they like to start, and they like the community to pay for that. Probably that price is negotiable, but and then the other way is the Ithaca approach, where Ithaca issued an RFP saying this is what we want to retrofit our entire building stock. Please respond. And so Block Power got that contract. I think that $100 million in financing commitments that Michael referred to was actually lined up by the city's sustainability director, who apparently comes out of the climate finance world. In talking to Block Power, they've said that they think it will actually cost a couple $2 billion to retrofit Ithaca's building stock. And so I think it's an issue for us to think about. We have to confront the fact that to retrofit all of our building stocks, a big cost, hopefully with big benefits. But, you know, a few $1 million here and there is not going to do it. And so, you know, so that goes to the point that we have to do this in a big way. We're not going to be able to do it in an incremental way. But, you know, it'd probably be worth looking at Ithaca's RFP. The way I think Block Power works is, you know, they do their marketing to the owners, but they're not going to spend a lot of time on people who are reticent, and they'll just move on to the next potential customer. I don't know what they're going to do when they have to come back around to the reticent ones, but I don't know what they're going to do with single family homes. I don't know what Ithaca's building stock is, but I assume they have a fair number of single family homes. But so it'd be interesting to find that out. And then the other thing I think to keep in mind is Block Power is a for-profit organization. And so one of the things they've asked for, which is problematic for a municipality, is basically a city endorsement. And since they're for-profit, you're basically favoring one business over potentially another. And so we haven't quite figured that part out either.
So my view on Black Power is they're quite promising, but I don't think Concord should be the first through the door with them. That we should see how they do in some other community in Massachusetts, let that other community be the guinea pig and learn from that, and then see if it's appropriate for Concord, especially because the easiest market for Black Power is going to be multifamily housing, and that's a limited part of the Concord landscape.
Yeah.
And no, I agree. I mean, they're gonna have to do a fair number of commercial buildings in Ithaca too as well. But
Yeah.
so in a way, I think it's like a new challenge for them, if I understand their business model. Also sort of related to this, and just mention, I believe Lexington Town Meeting did pass their benchmarking, building benchmarking bylaw. It doesn't have performance standards in it, but obviously that would be the next stage, but that will be another way to get buildings retrofitted.
Be good to take a look at. All right, well, I guess just looking at time, these were good updates. It sounds like we are making good progress. I don't know, Amanda, if there's anything else you wanted to share that you had learned on the planning board, but I'm wondering if the next step there might be to get back in touch with Haley and Elizabeth to see, you know, what, I guess I'm wondering what if support we can provide in their process, if that makes sense, and maybe go from there as they're reviewing.
Yeah, we can talk. I think they would be looking, I think they would be looking for comments from CAB and I would guess maybe the Public Works Commission and others that have related interests. And so I would imagine there would be sort of a comment period in the next month or so. And then I don't know if they would plan to have their public hearing towards the end of May, early June. But I think if CAB is really interested in looking at the energy performance, and if that could be incorporated somehow into site plan review, the legal questions of it and where it fits into our framework is the tough part. And so if that seemed like a good area we could focus on, maybe that sort of narrows it a little bit in the time frame that we have.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe you and I can touch base on who follows up and to see what their next steps are and get a timeline from them.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. With that, let's move on to, I'm hoping maybe a quick discussion. I wanted to circle back to Article 33 in particular. I feel like we already had agreement on 38, the solar article. But I do believe that we sort of had an outstanding conversation, or a conversation that we didn't conclude, on the Thoreau Business District zoning bylaw, and whether we would, as a group, support that. And I'll just go down to that area of our meeting minutes, just to refresh everybody's memory. So I don't know, what, I guess, further discussion or question we want to explore here. But I think ultimately, given that town meeting is happening before our next meeting, if we would like to support, we need to make that decision here. And if we are not ready yet, or not in agreement that we should support, then we can table. But I think the timing is now to decide that. If I remember right, there was still some question of maybe how, how we support that. And whether that's the right thing or not. That we talked about here, we could support this type of denser development based on sustainability benefits.
Right. We're talking Article 33, right, Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to pull
Yeah.
it up again just to have it.
I think when we were talking last time, we're trying to sort out in that article, there isn't a great deal of planning around the sustainability for developers that might be coming in, and I think we were trying to get a sense of, is that the role of Article 33 or the planning board as they look at the Thoreau district reconfiguration, and that sustainability would happen in another venue, right? Or should we be engaged in saying that, just like setbacks, building heights, some of the other features that they have, pedestrian friendly landscape, that sustainability should be in there as well. And I think that's where we were sort of settling out on whether or not is that the place to highlight this. Certainly, we all agree that anybody doing development should, hopefully, if it's new construction and if the home rule petition passes, you can't use any fossil fuels anyway.
Right.
But we don't know that, right, at this point. So I'll just put it out there to see what do people think is. I'm just not sure of the process that's most effective to get at the goal, which to ensure that thorough reimagining is in fact sustainable.
Yes, thank you for that, Michael. I appreciate you adding context to my memory anyway. And I wonder, it sounds like, remembering that was part of our concern, that the conversation around this really ties back to the planning board, the site plan development review guidelines that we just talked about earlier. And if maybe the better the better place to focus our energy. Not that, an approval at town meeting is significant energy. I don't mean to imply that, but if that our focus should be in that realm and making sure that we're, providing input and less focused necessarily on this particular article. I'm not sure. I confess, I don't know whether it was Warren or John, but you all are good at policing that. So whoever thinks they were first, go for it.
John was first.
Yeah, well, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this, but as I understand the article, it's just basically creating the zoning that would enable transit-oriented development to happen in a more concentrated fashion at the depot. And would also, I think, create more housing in Concord, which is needed. So I think that the way I look at it is that there's sort of two ways. So there's sort of, how do you make the development as sustainable as possible? And then secondly, how does it relate to the town's emission reduction goals? So, and I think CAB's role is about that second goal. And even if this was a highly energy efficient, low emitting project, if it adds any emission, if it creates any emissions, it's creating new emissions, right? That will be added to our inventory, unless they're somehow replacing higher emitting buildings that are already on the site. And I don't know exactly how the development would roll out, but I'm guessing no matter how efficient this project is, it's probably going to add emissions to the town's carbon footprint. And so I think we could have a role to make a note of that without necessarily opposing the zoning, because there are multiple goals, at work here. But it seems to me that would be appropriate. And then to make an argument that there should be stronger standards that you're either in this rezoning or through some complementary process that drives the development as close to net zero as we can get it.
So does that end up being a qualifier? I'm still learning this town meeting process, I will tell you. Is it something that I know I've certainly seen amendments to articles proposed, and those have to be voted on, obviously, but I don't know if not that I disagree with you, John, but I don't know if it's strong enough to be an amendment. It's more of a qualifier, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're in a position to propose an amendment, but it seems like we have a role to explain the implications of a development like this. I mean, it's a touchy subject because anything we say that's negative will probably be used to, like, people don't want to see the development, but
I just want to be sure. So because I think there was some confusion in town, so I just want to make sure that it is clear that there isn't a development proposed for the site. So that's only the zoning. Because there was like corresponding design guidelines that showed what future development could look like in the area. And some people saw it and didn't realize that it was hypothetical.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we do have that on the record, that there isn't a development proposed. And it instead would say it's near a commuter rail stop. In theory, there could be a lot of development in that area in the future. And does the bylaw improvements or changes that are being proposed reflect the type of development we would want to see in that area?
Yeah, and I think that's why it would be, I mean, I think, the rezoning enables something to happen that otherwise can't happen. And it'll be an addition to our emissions, I think, most likely. And I think it's important for the town to understand that, not as a reason to oppose it, but to come up with appropriate standards for it, because this also has to be consistent with our emissions reduction goal as well, right? And then if the town chooses to just go ahead with the rezoning and the development without any standards, that's a choice to make. At least they know that, what the implications were, and it can't be said later that no one brought that up. I mean, for me, it's a way to emphasize getting some complementary standards in place, and using this article to bring more attention to that.
Warren?
Yeah, I have two different thoughts about this. The first one, this is a very complicated article. It's going to be a contentious article. There's been a lot of misunderstanding about it. It's going to be a lot of discussion. I don't think we're in a great position to craft a coherent position to present to town meeting that will make a difference in that debate when there are going to be other bigger issues on the table. And secondly, I'm not sure I completely agree with your perspective, John, on this. I personally would be willing to live with more development in the town that increases emissions, if that means that there isn't some development somewhere else that would create even more emissions. And so transit-oriented development seems like a good idea, that to make it easy for people to live in places where they don't need a car and don't need to commute. Yeah, sure, that's going to be more emissions for the town, but the alternative would be worse.
Interesting. Okay, how about Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tough one to weigh in on, because I think the planning board would love us to kind of support it. And I think, that I think they struggled with some of the confusion around this. And I agree with a number of the, elements they're trying to fix in terms of making this transit and walkable and densifying, and their hands are tied with the current zoning requirements. I do think, based on the last conversation and the suggestions that John and I think John has made in terms of finding other ways to encourage the planning board to build this into any development that does come forward. How do you implement additional measures to really strongly encourage electrification and elimination of fossil fuel, as well as going beyond code, assuming we don't have, well, hopefully we'll have a really strong code. But I think there might be an opportunity for us to engage with the planning board or in a conversation about how to support, whether it's this development or others. I just don't know if we have the time to put together a letter or anything specific to this amendment for town meeting. So I would maybe encourage us to think about how can we engage the planning board on this topic, and those specific elements of how do you encourage the types of developments we want to see, knowing that there are a lot of restrictions on what they can do. And an emissions-based approach, I think, is interesting. So
Okay.
That's my perspective. Thanks.
No, I think that's all good, and I think what I'm, hearing, and I just want to make sure no one else wants to chime in before I sort of wrap up that conversation. But it sounds like our better used would be to kind of focus on any future development and the review, making sure that the review process, that we have mechanisms in place for encouraging, maybe requiring is too strong, but maybe we will get there. Some of the sustainable and zero energy or net zero guidelines that we want to see. So it sounds like at this point we take no position on this article for this upcoming town meeting, but rather double down on our engagement with the planning board to have those follow-on conversations as they are entertaining the site plan review. Be one immediate way to do that, but then also to continue the conversation forward on development and what we can do there, understanding what opportunities there are within the rules and regs that exist. So, okay. Good. All right. So with that, we're a little behind schedule for this last discussion. So there were a couple of good emails, I think, that sort of showed different sides of this, and I will kind of give a high level overview, but I know there are others based on my understanding, but I think there are others even on this call right now that are probably more versed in what's happening with this. So essentially the way I understand it is that there's a line item in the upcoming budget to be presented at town meeting related to purchase of a boiler in particular for the Alcott School to upgrade that boiler system. It's part of a multi-year or multi-phase effort to do some energy improvements there, energy system improvements, I should say. Essentially, those of us kind of in the climate, community within town were made aware of that. And I believe, Jerry, I think you'll have to help me on some of the particulars. I know you know them better, but someone raised it may have been Dean, if I'm remembering right, may have raised the flag on that as part of the finance committee as to why that particular effort was going forward, given our obvious focus on going away from a more conventional heating system. And so that's sort of where this all, this conversation began. So the question is, I might let you take it from there, because I think you know the more recent conversations related to that, if you don't mind.
No problem, Courtney. You captured it correctly. Basically there was a line item. There is a line item in the proposed budget for a new gas-fired boiler at Alcott. This was noticed by Dean Banfield in a FinCom meeting, and he questioned, why is that? So we now know some of what led to this. There is a 3-year project underway at Alcott that has been in process for 2 years. This is the third phase of 3. As I understand it, the plan to replace the whole heating system was driven by it reaching its theoretical end of life. Hard to believe, but Alcott, I guess, is more than 20 years old now. I kind of stirred things up a little bit by, as chair of CSEC, asking the school committee, how did this come about? And also, is there anything we can do at this date to supplant or come up with a hybrid system in lieu of another gas boiler that will have another 20-year lifetime at least? The short answer from the school committee was no. But I have suggested, and the superintendent, Dr. Hunter, and Cynthia Rainey, the chair of the school committee, have agreed to come to a special CSEC meeting, which will occur next week, a week from Thursday night, the 28th. And by the way, Courtney, I realized during this meeting that I never alerted you of that. I never confirmed that date. So
Confirmed. I know
have to
it was
apologize.
tentative. That's okay.
That's my bad. But the school committee and the superintendent have known this date has been tentative from the moment I spoke with them, and then I confirmed with them several days ago that we, in fact, will meet on the 28th. So my goals for that meeting are to basically understand how we got here, number one, and number two, get information to help us determine if we want to suggest a change in their plans. And number three, learning from number one of how did we get here, try and put some process in place where this does not happen again. We have two more schools that are lined up behind Alcott, those being Thorough and Willard. And I believe that the planning process for Thorough is due to begin maybe next year. So that's the picture behind all this. And well, I'll hand it back to you, Courtney.
No, thanks,
the
Jared.
description.
Appreciate that. So first, I think just thank you for the confirmation that next week's meeting is going to happen. If you could provide me with the, if you wouldn't mind, with the link to that, so that I can share it with CAB. And so if there's anyone on the CAB that could, attend, if you're willing, I think it would be, worthwhile to hear a little bit more. And I do think it's a interesting conversation that CAB we have sort of taken up these four initiatives, and they're all super important. And we've all agreed that we have limited capacity, so there is there is a limitation into how much in a given year or even a couple of years that we can move forward. But I think this just bring to light an interesting, I think another interesting take on, particularly our municipal facilities that are more, within town control, if you will. And how what's the decision-making process for retrofits, for renewals of some of the, infrastructure, and we have, we have goals in place, but how are we actually facilitating that as a group? And I don't know that it's necessarily for CAB to decide in a vacuum. I think, I think some of the comments that Brian Folds shared with a few folks are equally valid. There's town staff that are impacted by this, trying to get their the things that they need to get accomplished. And so, how can we be sort of working collaboratively as a team on this, right? So I guess I wanted to bring this up first to CAB to make sure that, if anyone would like to be and has interest in learning more about how the Alcott process went in particular, make sure that I alert you to that meeting. But then secondly, I think kind of thinking through it, and again, I don't know that it's an initiative that we're going to be able to take on this year in particular, but maybe thinking through, like, what is the role of CAB, the Climate Action Plan, and how is that, like, practically dovetailing with municipal operation, and particularly both O&M but also capital improvement, because I think both will come into play here. So we don't have a ton of time for discussion, but maybe we'll spend about 5 minutes or so taking any comments on that. And I guess I'd like to hear whether you feel worthy of a further discussion, and so we'll make more space on it for next month's agenda to continue the conversation.
Courtney, can I add just a couple of comments here, listening to what Jerry said, and also having a little bit of background on this, that the amendment for Article 19 has actually gone through sort of two different versions. The first version was to simply not accept the line item at all, the 350,000 or whatever. And then after more thought, the second version came in, and it sounded very thoughtful to me, that the second version would be to put a pause on the purchasing of the boilers, but to use some of that capital spend to be more informed. In other words, to go out and get an MEP, engineering firm, and to ask the question, are there alternatives to purchasing these boilers without disrupting some of the valid points that the school committee has made, but made perhaps without being informed. In other words, the disruption of simply not having these boilers coming in could impact the schedule of the schools. It could impact the entire existing systems designs for the distribution that is currently there to have to be ripped out, right? A very sizable disruption happening because we're coming in the 11th hour. And so that second version still maintains, at least with not getting more information, that we ought to put the boilers on hold, for Jerry's point about the next 30 years, but not to do it in such a draconian way if in fact our influence to do anything has passed. In other words, this has been in that budgeting process and part of the school committee for several years now. And so from their perspective, having people come in the 11th hour and all of a sudden say, hey, you shouldn't put any boilers in there because, by the way, we don't really think we should be, accelerating the adoption of fossil fuels. So that's a little unfair. So the idea was, well, maybe there is time, and Jerry, that you point to a meeting coming up, a more thoughtful time to say, let's use some of that money to be sure that we're really accurate about the level of disruption, which would be so costly that the benefit wouldn't drive it, right? And that seemed to me a good idea. I was on that building committee. I can't believe it's 20 years. I was on the building committee at that time. What we were debating was simply a higher standard performing school and daylighting. Those are the two big things that were in there. And displacement ventilation was part of that. And all displacement ventilation is, in its simplicity, is that it increases the indoor air quality. And at that point, indoor air quality for students and visual environment for students with daylighting were the two most important issues addressed. We weren't even talking decarbonization, and we certainly weren't talking about whether or not it should be a gas boiler or electric. And in fact, the maturity of electrification wasn't even there. Yeah. So this seems as a fallback, and it might come out of, Jerry, the meeting that you're having, is to get clarity on, is there an opportunity here to stand firm on Article 51, which is not increasing emissions, or is it a case where a far more prudent is, how do we get ourselves into this fix to begin with? And setting a policy that says it well before we're line iteming an expenditure, a capital expenditure for a mechanical electrical systems, that we've done the analysis beforehand, that every single capital project would be reviewed from its emissions, for lack of a better word, its emissions optimization. And then we wouldn't be doing this in the 11th hour. So does that make sense, Jerry?
Yes, I'm just going to say you nailed it, start to finish. And the last piece, I think, is even bigger, which is really we should have a process in this town for how are we going to go about this with our other municipal buildings.
Right.
So at the moment, that's bigger than what I think I or others have contemplated right now. But I just wanted to, point out that I think you're spot on that and all the rest of it. And just for everyone's edification, because I can't remember if you introduced it this way, Courtney, or not, but separately from the CSEC review, there is a proposed amendment to the school budget that is in the works, and that's what Michael referred to.
No, I'm glad he brought that up and clarified. Yeah, I hadn't mentioned that specifically.
Is it useful to send some kind of a letter or memo to the select board from CAB and CSEC to basically articulate what Michael said, and use this as a learning experience? Because I'm not sure I understood the timeline exactly, but it sounds like this project was budgeted after Article 51 passed. And so it seems like there was a disconnect between town decision making and Article 51. And so there's a need for a policy and procedure to be set up so that we avoid this in the future.
This is related, but it may feel tangential, but it's not. Did CAB play a role in the sustainable fleet policy? I know that was, I believe, driven by a warrant article that said one should be created and that it should be accompanied by the fleet study and that there should be some funding set aside to do that study. And I think the article may have also said funding for some of the implementation to install the EV chargers. But for the EV policy piece, the electric first policy, was CAB involved in drafting that? Or was that something that Kate worked on alone? Just sort of kind of wondering where the history was and who was involved. And if no one knows, that's okay too. I can do some digging.
I don't
That's a-
remember us
Good
reviewing.
question. I don't either.
Okay.
At least in my tenure, but I was not an original member. I don't know if anybody on here was.
I wonder
Michael
if
or
it
Lauren?
came out of green communities, because you have to have a vehicle policy for that.
So
Instead of-
yeah, we did have a green vehicle policy, but the new all electric policy was just updated more recently. And so I think it did come from a warrant article asking for that to be done. And so it sounds like maybe Kate drafted it and maybe got feedback from town staff and then
I don't think this was discussed at CAB.
okay.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I do, if you think back, do wonder 2019 is probably the first time that this went into the budget for Alcott, and that would have been roughly the time we were beginning that action plan, I believe. So even though, yes, John, it might have been, post passing of Article 51, like the pieces may not have all been in place or being connected. So
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, these things will happen early in the
absolutely,
process. So the question is how to
absolutely, yeah.
make it
So
better in the future.
exactly. So I do think it's interesting, Warren. I just want to acknowledge your and maybe we continue to discuss that. What action we could take as a result of this. Obviously, there's the immediate, get the understanding if we can on sort of the process that led to this, which is fine. But I think more importantly, what can we affect moving forward, and so how best to do that. Given that we are at 8:00 tonight, I think I'd like to put this as an agenda topic for next month's agenda to discuss a little further. And it might be more than just a letter, but that might be a good first start. So let's have that conversation
We might
again
have,
next week
sorry
or
for
next month.
talk-
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Michael.
sorry for talking over you. Since there's a good deal of tension here between leadership at the school committee and the advocates for Article 51, maybe this getting together that Jerry mentioned with Laura Hunter and others, maybe somebody from CAB, I could volunteer to attend that, and maybe we could come up with a good solution that gets everybody agreeing, rather than creating any more division by the CAB writes a letter and say, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
this is the way we should do it. But we haven't really closed the gap with others
Mhm,
who might be offended with that. So we somehow
mhm, mhm.
diffuse the tension, because
Mhm.
it seems to me the goal of everybody engaged in this is exactly the same.
Right.
There's no
right.
there's no dispute about the goal, getting off of fossil fuels. I think it's more process, and
Correct.
that might help us get to a conclusion. But I know it's the 11th hour right here, so we don't have a lot of time to talk about it more.
Right.
But that
Right.
may be, to your point, Courtney, that might be the direction to go in.
Okay.
It goes beyond the school committee, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
Yes.
it's much broader than that for sure.
Yeah.
Jerry, just quickly, a quick comment there.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, number one, echo something that Michael said. My goal, I don't want this meeting to be adversarial. I think there's maybe some tendency toward that, but I want to avoid that at all costs. And secondly, I would appreciate it as chair if we could get some support from CAB, such as Michael, you attending, or anyone else attending, not merely for support, but also for critical analysis and thinking of, well, what's going on here, and what are some viable responses. So I'd love to see you there. I'll send the meeting information to Courtney, but very briefly, it's next Thursday night, not tomorrow night, the 28th, 7 p.m. over Zoom.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah,
And just because Cab loves homework, I would say the one proposal that I've seen, floated in many discussions is updating the administrative policy, I think 59 and 60, and making it adding in more of a focus on municipal facilities and the process it would go through. And that's one direction. And then the other that I feel like was sort of posed tonight is more related to all capital improvements, not just buildings. And then I'm sure there are other options. And so if people have heard of other communities doing this, not through maybe an administrative policy, but some other way, if we came to that meeting with solutions we were interested in, of like, where do we move forward, I always find that's helpful. So those are the two that I've heard of. I'm sure there are more. A policy like the fleet study or the fleet policy it has been great to have back that up with a plan because I'm hopeful that it will make it easier to implement. So maybe we can also sort of think through that piece
Yeah.
too of great to have a policy. It's great to have a plan. Do we need both? Do we not need both?
Yeah.
That may not happen on, in one meeting where we have a lot to talk about.
But it might be
Well,
the start of that conversation.
And
So-
some towns have municipal facility improvement plans.
Mhm.
So that you identify needs ahead of failure and.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
prioritize.
the Sustainable Concord does have an action item that's maybe something of
Mhm.
create a municipal energy reduction plan, but it could be an energy transition plan rather than just energy reduction. So anyway, sorry, I'm just expanding the meeting at this
No, I
point.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. All right. All right. Yeah. So Jerry, if you could send that over, that would be great. We'll share that with Kat and anyone who can join. And I think it sounds like this is, part of a good conversation that we can continue in May. Those of you who are a maybe for town meeting, if your plans solidify, please let me know. And Amanda, we can connect on an alternative, a backup plan. With that, we are over. So I want to
8:06.
8:06. I want to conclude the meeting for tonight. So I thank you all for joining and for all your great input and all your great work too that you're doing. So could someone make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I
Someone second?
second.
Great. I think we are all adjourned at this point then.
Goodbye, guys.
Enjoy the rest of
Thanks,
your
Courtney. Thanks,
evening.
everyone.